Hello, everyone. Welcome to English with Ruth. This is not your typical English lesson. There are no boring grammar points and drills. Instead, we focus on having real conversations on everyday topics to improve your speaking, listening skills, and even vocabulary. Regardless of your English level, we have carefully curated topics that are not just fun to listen to, but will also help improve your skills. But remember, learning goes both ways. So every vocabulary or expression learned should be repeated in your conversations to improve retention. Wherever you are right now, whether you're sitting at your desk, lying on your bed, or maybe walking somewhere quietly, I want you to feel like this is a space where you can slow down. Today, we're going to talk about something that touches every single person, no matter who they are or where they're from. We're going to talk about change. Not loud or dramatic change, but the quiet kind. The kind that happens slowly over time. The kind you don't even notice until one day you stop and realize you're not the same person you used to be. And joining me to explore this topic is Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Ruth. It's good to be here. You know, when you said that just now about quiet change, I felt that very deeply, because I think most of the biggest changes in our lives don't happen suddenly. They're not loud. Instead, they creep up on us quietly. Sometimes, you don't even notice how much is changing until one day you suddenly realize everything is different.
Exactly. I think people often expect change to feel obvious. They expect it to feel like a clear moment or a turning point. But in reality, change is quieter than that. It happens in small moments, in small disappointments, in small realizations, in the way someone speaks to you, or the way someone stops speaking to you. And without realizing it, those moments begin to shape you, first gently and then permanently.
I remember something from a few years ago. It wasn't a big event, it was just an ordinary evening. I was sitting alone in my apartment, it was quiet, and I remember realizing I didn't feel like the same person I used to be. It wasn't in a bad way, it was just different. I realized that the things that used to excite me didn't excite me anymore. Also, the things that used to hurt me didn't hurt so much. At that moment, it dawned on me that it wasn't because I chose to change, but because life had quietly changed me.
That's such a powerful realization. And I think many people experience that moment, but they don't always understand it. Sometimes people think something is wrong with them. They think, why don't I feel the same way anymore? Why don't I react the same way? But often, nothing is wrong. It simply means you've grown. Growth doesn't always feel exciting or like a particular defining moment where everything suddenly seems clearer. Sometimes it feels unfamiliar. Sometimes it even feels like loss because you're saying goodbye to a version of yourself that once felt permanent.
That's true. And I think there's also something else. Sometimes people don't notice their own change, but others do. They'll say things like, "You're different now," and they don't always mean it as a compliment. They might say it with disappointment or with distance, and that can make you question yourself. It can make you wonder if change is something to feel guilty about.
Exactly. That's something people don't talk about enough. Change can feel lonely because the people who knew the old version of you may not fully understand the new version. It's interesting because you may not fully understand yourself either, because you are in between. You're not who you used to be, and you're not fully who you're becoming. You're in transition, and that can be a weird place to be sometimes because of how uncertain it is. It's almost like you don't recognize yourself. On the flip side, the transition phase is a very honest and critical phase.
I think one of the strangest parts of change is that it doesn't ask for permission. It happens whether you're ready or not, and whether you want it or not. You experience life, people, and time, and slowly you become someone new. These experiences can be positive or negative, and they shape you.
And sometimes, change protects you. It teaches you what to hold on to and what to release. It teaches you where you're strong and where you're still healing. Change is not all bad. It reveals truth. It might not happen all at once, but it will eventually. Sam, do you ever miss the person you used to be? When you think back, do you think you're a bit different? And how so?
Yes, I do. There was a time when I moved through the world very openly. I trusted easily. I didn't analyze every word or every silence. I just believed people when they spoke. And there was a kind of peace in that. I remember laughing more freely because I wasn't carrying so much awareness. Awareness can be heavy. It changes the way you see everything.
That's very true. Awareness changes everything. Once you begin to see clearly, you can't go back to not seeing, even if a part of you misses that version of yourself. I remember a version of myself that believed time would eventually fix everything. I believed that pain was temporary, and that people would always remain who they showed themselves to be in the beginning. Then, I realized that people don't always remain the same, and neither do you.
Exactly. Change is constant after all. There was a moment I was having a conversation with someone who had once been very important to me. And as they spoke, it dawned on me that I was no longer the person they thought I was, and they were no longer the person I thought they were. We were speaking to old versions of each other that no longer existed. And there was this strange emotional distance, like standing in the same room, but living in different realities.
That's such a powerful and painful realization. When you understand that two people can share memories, but no longer share the same emotional space, it just means time has done its quiet work.
I think one of the hardest things is realizing that change isn't always something you choose. Sometimes it's something that happens to protect you. You don't wake up one day and decide to become more guarded. It happens slowly. After disappointment, silence, after moments where you needed understanding and didn't receive it. Eventually, your mind begins to adjust, and you begin to adapt to the situation.
You're right. This is when we begin to protect ourselves, and it can play out in different ways. It can look like becoming quieter or more observant. It could also become being selective with your energy because you've learned the value of your emotional space. I think people sometimes misunderstand this. They see your quietness and assume something is wrong. But often, quietness is clarity.
There's also something else I've noticed. You don't always feel the change while it's happening. You feel it afterward. You notice it in the way you react differently to situations that once would have shaken you. You notice it in the way silence no longer makes you anxious, in the way solitude begins to feel peaceful instead of lonely. That's when you realize something inside you has shifted.
Exactly. I'm of the opinion that there's something deeply emotional about realizing you've changed. You notice it in unexpected moments, when you hear yourself responding calmly in a situation that once would have overwhelmed you. It could also show up as walking away from something that you once would have fought to keep. You remain silent where you once would have explained yourself endlessly. And afterward, you pause, because you recognize yourself. But also at the same time, you don't. There's familiarity, but also distance.
Yes, and that moment can feel both peaceful and unsettling at the same time. Peaceful because you realize you've grown stronger. Unsettling because growth often means leaving something behind. Could be old reactions, emotional patterns, old versions of yourself that once defined you. There's a quiet grief in that, because you didn't know what you know now. You hadn't experienced what you've experienced now.
It's also interesting to point out that once you get to that point and you're fully transformed, it'll be impossible to get back to who you used to be. Even if you wanted to, or if a part of you misses that version of yourself. Because awareness transforms you permanently. It changes the way you interpret everything. Words, silence, behavior, energy. You begin to see beyond surfaces, and that level of perception changes how you exist in the world.
I remember noticing that change in myself one evening. I was sitting alone, thinking about my life, my past, the people I had known, and I realized I no longer felt anger towards certain memories. Pain had been replaced by understanding, and understanding replaced resentment.
That's such a powerful point. People often expect healing to feel like happiness, but sometimes healing feels like calmness, like emotional steadiness, like the absence of chaos. You don't react the same way anymore.
A surprising thing about change is realizing that you've become someone your younger self needed. Someone calmer, someone wiser, someone more emotionally grounded. You begin to provide yourself with the understanding you once searched for externally. You stop waiting for others to validate your experience, because you validate yourself. That internal shift is life-changing, not because it makes life easier, but because it makes you stronger, steadier, more at peace with yourself.
That's a stage that's often not talked about. I think self-development is one thing we should always work towards at every point in life. Unfortunately, we tend to focus on every other aspect except the emotional part. One way we can easily tell how much we've changed and grown is when we can look through the lens of who we used to be and how we had once wanted to be who we currently are. When we are comfortable in who we are at the present, we can successfully say we've grown. Sam, you know what I find interesting? I think one of the most unexpected parts of change is realizing that after everything, you return to yourself, a deeper and more complete version of yourself. It's almost like life slowly removes the noise, the expectations, illusions, and emotional dependencies. And what remains is a stronger, clearer you.
Exactly. When change happens, people often expect a permanent total transformation from who we used to be, our values, reactions, energy. This is not always the case. I would say we become more refined. Just like gold going through fire to be refined, we become exactly that.
We spend a lot of our lives searching for one thing or the other, searching for understanding, searching for acceptance, searching for emotional security, often in other people. But over time, many people realize something profound. The most important emotional security comes from within, because your relationship with yourself shapes everything else. From how you interpret experiences to how you respond to uncertainty and emotional difficulty, self-connection becomes your foundation.
That's the turning point of everything. Acceptance, or self-acceptance as in this case, is crucial to growth. Accepting that change is a part of life is critical in staying grounded and learning from experiences. When you stop resisting change, you stop fighting reality. And when you stop fighting reality, you experience more peace, because you begin to flow with your life instead of against it. That doesn't mean everything becomes easy, but it becomes clearer and less chaotic internally. This will in turn create confidence, because clarity brings confidence.
Yes, and I think over time, people begin to trust themselves again, probably more deeply this time around. They trust their emotional perceptions, instincts, and their boundaries. They stop abandoning themselves to maintain external approval, and they stop compromising their internal stability out of self-respect and confidence. Once someone gets to this stage, it transforms how you exist in the world.
You're right. Change is not all bad. Situations arise all the time, and learning to flow with them, learn from them, and become a better person through them is all that matters.
Exactly. Well, that brings us to the end of our conversation on change. To all our listeners, I have this question. What's one moment when you realized you've changed? Was it a quiet realization? Or did someone point it out to you? And remember, if you want more everyday conversations on various topics to improve vocabulary and fluency, kindly subscribe to our channel. New videos are out every week. Until next time, bye!